You know, if you wanted to build a physical fortress, like a modern-day panic room right inside your house, the process is actually surprisingly straightforward.
Yeah, it's a pure engineering problem.
Exactly. I mean, you consult the blueprints, you pour the reinforced concrete, install a solid steel door, or maybe finish it off with one of those biometric locks.
Right, and the whole endeavor is highly measurable. It's entirely binary.
Yeah, the walls either hold up to external pressure or they just fail. And honestly, there is something incredibly comforting about that level of certainty, you know?
Oh, absolutely. We as humans, we deeply prefer our defenses to be visible. Physical things we can categorize. It provides this tangible barrier against, an unpredictable outside world.
Right.
You can literally run your hand along that concrete and tell yourself that you are physically safe in that space.
Right, like the thread stays out there and you stay in here. But
Yeah.
and this is a big, but the moment you step out of the physical realm and into human psychology,
Oh, boy.
into this incredibly messy world of anxiety, interpersonal conflict, and just the constant grinding barrage of daily stresses, suddenly that physical blueprint is just completely useless.
Yeah, because now we're looking at the challenge of building a mental fortress. And that landscape is entirely invisible. It's murky. It's definitely not binary.
No, not at all. So the question becomes, how do you actually build a panic room for your mind when the threats are coming from your own thoughts? Or, from the people you have to interact with every single day?
I mean, that is the ultimate architectural challenge of being human. Because unlike a physical panic room, you can't build a mental fortress by simply shutting the world out.
Right. You can't just lock the door.
Exactly. If you completely isolate your mind, avoid all conflict, and sever your ties with society, you haven't actually built a fortress, right? You've just built a prison.
Wow. Yeah. That's a huge distinction.
True mental resilience, the kind that actually serves you, it has to exist out in the open. It has to function perfectly while you are actively engaged with the utter chaos of the modern world.
And that, listeners, is exactly what we are going to figure out today. This deep dive is designed specifically for you. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by the sheer unpredictability of your life or deeply frustrated by difficult people.
Which is all of us, let's be honest.
Right. Or even just exhausted by your own endless cycle of desires and anxieties, we are going deep into an ancient manual that addresses exactly that. Today's mission is to explore a dense, just remarkable philosophical document titled 11 on Equanimity and First Principles.
Specifically, the 11th book of these notes, yeah.
Right. And our goal is to take its profound and frankly sometimes completely counterintuitive ideas and translate them into a highly practical toolkit for your modern mind.
And I have to say, the source material we are looking at today is an absolute treasure trove. I mean, it's not just a collection of theoretical musings from some guy sitting in an ivory tower.
Not at all.
It is a rigorous, applied philosophy that's meant to be tested in the crucible of real life. It's really a survival guide for an unpredictable world.
Yeah, and looking at this stack of notes and translations we have sitting here on the desk, it is a fascinating, almost intimidating mix of stuff.
It really is.
We've got these dense philosophical maxims, references to ancient heavyweights like Socrates and Epictetus.
Oh, and those incredibly detailed historical footnotes about the evolution of Greek theater.
Yes, and we'll definitely get to this later. Inexplicably, right in the middle of the manuscript notes, there is this stark, bold, giant red letter T just sitting there on the page.
Yeah, it's such a weird visual interruption.
We will definitely unpack what that means. But at its core, this text is a blueprint for an unconquerable mind. So, okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even begin with a document that tackles the entire scope of human psychology?
Well, I think we have to begin with a foundational premise the author makes about what makes human beings utterly unique in the natural order.
Okay.
He argues that the reasonable soul, which is the conscious, rational, self-reflecting part of you, it has natural properties and privileges that literally nothing else in the known world possesses.
Yeah, the author draws a really sharp contrast between humans and the rest of the natural world. Like he points out that plants, trees, and animals bear fruit, right? But they bear it entirely for the consumption of others.
Exactly.
An apple tree spends all its energy growing an apple, but the tree doesn't sit there and eat its own apple. A bee makes honey for the hive, not for its own isolated, enjoyment.
Right, but the reasonable soul operates on a completely different economy. The translation we have notes that the rational mind sees itself, shapes its own structure, and this is the most important part, it reaps its own fruits.
Let's break that down because that's huge.
What's fascinating here is the absolute autonomy being described. The ability to see oneself is the mechanism of self-awareness. Shaping oneself is self-determination. But that final point, reaping your own fruits, that's a profound psychological paradigm shift.
Also,
The author is declaring that the ultimate product of your life is not your accumulated wealth or your social status or even the legacy you leave behind. The ultimate product is the character and quality of your own mind. You are the primary consumer of your own psychological state.
wow. Okay, so if my mind is constantly churning with bitterness, resentment, and envy, I am the one who has to eat that bitterness for breakfast every single day.
Precisely. You're forced to consume your own toxic harvest. And conversely, if you cultivate a mind that is tranquil, reasoned, and fair, you get to harvest and enjoy that tranquility entirely regardless of what is happening in the external world.
You're fully self-contained in that regard.
Exactly.
That reframes things beautifully.
Yeah.
But the text doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
It takes this idea of the soul's autonomy and applies it to something that honestly terrifies most people. The concept of time and the suddenness of death.
Yes. And to explain this, the author introduces this incredible analogy involving dancers and actors on a stage.
Right, the dancer analogy.
Yeah.
I think it's crucial for understanding how this philosophy approaches life's timeline. We usually view life as this rigid narrative arc.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's lay out the analogy. If a dancer's in the middle of a complex routine, or an actor is in the third act of a play, and they get suddenly interrupted, maybe the power goes out or they're literally pulled off the stage, the whole action feels ruined.
Right. It feels incomplete because it didn't reach its choreographed finale.
But the author argues the rational soul is fundamentally different. It says that in whatever part of time the soul is surprised by death, it can look at whatever it has in its hand and declare it complete and full. The soul can depart, saying, I have lived, and I lack nothing that properly belonged to me.
I mean, just think about the immense psychological freedom embedded in that viewpoint. We are culturally conditioned from birth to view our lives as a three-act play. You grow up and learn in Act 1, you build a career and a family in Act 2, and you enjoy the fruits of your labor in a peaceful Act 3.
Yeah, that's the standard script.
And if that arc is cut short at age 30 or 40, society calls it a profound tragedy, specifically because it feels like an unfinished performance. But this text is arguing that the reasonable soul does not operate on a linear narrative at all.
Right.
It operates entirely in the present moment. If your character is composed and you are acting with virtue and integrity right now, your life is entirely complete right now.
Because there's no missing final act. The work of being a good human isn't a destination, it's a stage of being.
Exactly. The work of the soul is instantaneous and perpetual. It completely redefines what a complete life actually means. It's not about the duration of years you accumulate. It's entirely about the quality of your presence in any given second.
Which naturally leads us to a highly specific and honestly a wildly provocative claim the author makes about the passage of time itself.
Oh, the 40-year-old rule.
Yes. The text claims that anyone who has reached the age of 40, assuming they possess, basic awareness, has essentially seen all things, both past and future. The argument is that everything that happens in the world is just a revolution, a continuous restoration of the exact same themes over and over again.
Yeah, the quote implies this sweeping uniformity to the human experience. The idea is that those who come after us won't see anything fundamentally new, and those who came before us didn't see anything more than we see today.
Okay, I have to throw a massive flag on the play here.
I thought you might.
I mean, that sounds incredibly bleak. The idea that there's nothing new under the sun. It sounds like the ultimate midlife crisis rationalization, like, congratulations on turning 40, you've seen the whole show, buckle up for decades of reruns.
It does sound like that at first glance, yeah.
And on a practical level, it feels demonstrably false. A 40-year-old in the year 1900 had absolutely no concept of the internet, or artificial intelligence, or landing on the moon. So how can the author claim we've seen everything?
That is the natural modern objection, absolutely. But it stems from confusing technological novelty with human mechanics. The author isn't talking about the tools we use. He's talking about the psychological and social reality of being human.
Okay, so it's not about the hardware, it's about the software.
Exactly.
Think of it like a massive multiplayer online video game. When you first start playing, everything is dazzling. You don't know the maps, you don't know the strategies, you're constantly surprised. But after you've played the game for a few years, you deeply understand the core physics engine.
Right.
You know how the mechanics work. Now, the game developers might release a huge expansion pack. They swap out the medieval swords for futuristic laser blasters. They
Yeah.
change the castles into floating space stations.
Yeah.
Visually, it is entirely new. But the underlying code, the mechanics of how players cooperate, how they betray each other, how resources are hoarded, how power corrupts, that is identical. The
Yeah.
changing graphics don't surprise the veteran player.
That is a much more accurate way to frame it. The physics engine of human nature does not change. Greed, ambition, love, fear, the rise and fall of empires, the sting of betrayal, the joy of connection, these are the core mechanics. When the author says a 40-year-old has seen everything, he means they have witnessed the full spectrum of human behavior and the cycles of fortune.
But even if that's true, doesn't adopting that mindset kind of kill the joy of life? If I view every new experience as just a reskin of something I've already seen, where is the wonder?
This is where we have to look really closely at the text's ultimate goal. This concept is not meant to induce a cynical boredom. It is a finely tuned tool for equanimity.
A defense mechanism.
It exactly against panic. The author isn't saying you shouldn't enjoy the technological leaps or beautiful moments. He's saying you shouldn't be psychologically destabilized when the world throws a terrifying challenge at you.
I see.
We suffer immensely because we constantly believe our modern problems, our current political crises, our personal heartbreaks are entirely unprecedented.
Right. We think we're the first generation to ever experience this specific flavor of chaos.
Right. And that belief breeds sheer panic. The 40-year-old rule is a grounding mechanism. When you realize you are witnessing a revolution of the same fundamental human themes, you strip away the terror of the unprecedented. You realize humanity has survived this gameplay loop before.
That makes a lot of sense.
And this perfectly sets up a concept the author borrows from the pre-Socratic philosopher Empedocles regarding the ideal ship of the mind.
Yes, the text brings in Empedocles, who compares the healthy soul to a perfect sphere or globe.
It's perhaps one of the most elegant visualizations in ancient philosophy. The text describes the soul as a perfect sphere when it is all of one form and figure. It maintains this shape when, and this is a great quote, neither greedily stretcheth out herself unto anything, nor basely contracts herself, or lies flat and dejected.
And when it maintains that spherical integrity, it shineth all with light, and through that light it sees the true nature of the universe.
Right, let's really visualize the mechanics of that. A glowing, perfectly taut sphere.
Okay.
The text says if you greedily stretch out, your sphere becomes distorted. It gets pulled out of shape. Psychologically, that's what happens when you are consumed by desire for something external, obsessing over a promotion, craving someone else's approval, lusting after a lifestyle you don't have. You are literally warping your own psychological structure. You are creating weak points.
And the opposite is true too.
Yeah.
If you basely contract or lie flat, that's depression or cowardice or despair. You are collapsing inward under the weight of the world.
Exactly. The ultimate goal is tension-free equilibrium. Think about the physics of a sphere. A perfect sphere has no jagged edges for the world to catch on. It's perfectly contained. It's robust against external pressure.
And crucially, it generates its own light. This relates directly back to our first point. The soul reaps its own fruit. When your mind maintains its spherical integrity, it isn't reliant on external validation or favorable circumstances to shine.
Right. The theory is flawless. But maintaining a perfectly round mental sphere when you're walking through a world designed to constantly distract, provoke, and tempt you, that feels nearly impossible.
Yeah, how do we actually stop ourselves from greedily stretching out when modern life is essentially a massive machine built to dangle shiny objects in front of us?
Well, the author tackles this head-on with a method that is incredibly specific and honestly quite jarring.
You're referring to the divide and conquer method for deconstructing desire.
Exactly. The author provides a set of instructions on how to not be conquered by things we find overwhelmingly pleasant or impressive.
Right, let's take music or a breathtaking performance. The text says if you're captivated by a pleasant song or dance, or the ancient mixed martial arts of the pancration, you shouldn't just let it wash over you. You should actively divide it up.
Yeah, it instructs you to take a beautiful voice and divide it into the particular sounds whereof it doth consist.
You listen to each individual isolated note and ask yourself, is this single sound what conquers me? Is that specific vibration what is taking over my mind? The text claims that by dividing the whole into its component parts, you achieve a sense of contempt for it, breaking your infatuation.
It is a radical exercise in reductionism. You're deliberately stripping away the gestalt, the phenomenon where the whole is perceived as greater than the sum of its parts.
Right.
If you're watching a brutal wrestling match, you do not allow yourself to get swept up in the narrative of the fight, or the roar of the crowd, or the perceived glory. You isolate a single specific posture. You look at one man's forearm pressed against another man's jaw and ask, is it this specific mundane arrangement of bone and muscle that I find so thrilling?
And the answer is usually a resounding no.
Exactly. You dismantle the illusion by zooming in too close.
Now, I understand the mechanics of what the author is doing here, but I have to completely disagree with the premise again.
Go for it.
Doesn't this intentionally kill the magic of being alive? I mean, it's like taking your absolute favorite song, a piece of music that moves you to tears, that has this undeniable, transcendent groove, and isolating a single snare drum hit. Is it this thwack that moves my soul?
Right.
Or taking a breathtaking Renaissance painting and staring at a single 1-inch square of blue pigment? Is it this dried paste that I revere? Of course it isn't. The magic is in the combination. Isolating the snare drum ruins the groove entirely. It destroys the emotional resonance of the art. Why on earth would we want to walk around intentionally ruining the beautiful things we enjoy?
That is the exact trap most people fall into when reading this text. It feels like a recipe for becoming a joyless, analytical robot who just walks through an art museum scoffing at canvas and oil.
Yeah, sounds miserable.
But the author anticipates this exact critique. The text explicitly includes a massive foundational exemption clause. It says you must remember to divide and deconstruct everything besides virtue and those things that proceed from virtue.
Besides virtue. So character and goodness get a pass from the reductionist laser beam.
Exactly. Virtue acts of true goodness, integrity, courage, profound human connection, those should not be deconstructed. You are meant to revere those things as complete wholes.
Oh, but...
The divide and conquer exercise is a targeted tactical weapon. It's only to be used against external things that you are subject to be much affected with in a way that destabilizes you.
Right. If a burning desire for a luxury watch or an obsession with gaining a specific social status is stretching your soul out of its spherical shape and causing you anxiety, then you deconstruct it.
Yes, you break the watch down to little gears and pieces of glass. You break the status down into the fleeting opinions of strangers. You are trying to achieve contempt, which, by the way, in the Stoic context, doesn't mean a hateful disgust, but rather a loss of unwarranted reverence.
You use it to break the spell of things that have too much power over you.
Precisely. And further into the notes, the author explains the underlying mechanics of why this spell exists in the first place. He points out a fascinating truth about the things we get so worked up over. The text states that these objects and events come not unto thee themselves, but thou in a manner goest unto them. In reality, objects and situations stand still and quiet, without any noise or stir at all.
It's our minds that print opinions onto them.
That is the core mechanism. We are the ones carrying the ink. Let's use the luxury watch example. A diamond-encrusted watch sitting in a display case is just a collection of metal, crystallized carbon, and glass. It is entirely inert.
Right.
It has absolutely no intrinsic power to make you feel jealous or inadequate or successful. Your mind takes its own psychological ink and prints the opinion success, wealth, or I am lacking onto that metal and glass. And then you react emotionally to your own printing.
We are essentially the printing press of our own misery. We manufacture the label, slap it on a quiet object, and then let the label ruin our day.
The deconstruction method is simply a way to wipe the ink off. The text explicitly reminds us, now it is in our power not to print them, and if they creep in and lurk in some corner, it is in our power to wipe them off.
That is an incredibly empowering visual. But here's the friction point. It's easy enough to analyze a song or deconstruct a luxury watch and wipe the prints off inert objects. But it is infinitely harder when the things stretching our soul out of shape are not objects, but other people. How do we wipe the ink off a person who is actively antagonizing us?
This brings us to one of the most vivid, urgent, and complex metaphors in the entire document. The text pivots from how we manage our internal desires to how we manage our intrinsic connection to humanity, and it introduces the concept of the social tree.
The author uses a striking botanical metaphor. The text says, a branch cut off from the continuity of that which was next unto it must needs be cut off from the whole tree. So a man that is divided from another man is divided from the whole society.
It's an elegant, irrefutable statement of radical interconnectedness. If you're a branch on a tree and you sever your connection to the branch right next to you, you aren't just pushing away that single branch. Geometrically and biologically, you are detaching yourself from the central trunk.
The text elaborates on this beautifully. It notes that in nature, a branch is usually cut off by an external force, like a woodcutter with an axe.
Hmm.
But humans are the only creatures that do it to themselves. The author writes, "He that hates and is averse cuts himself off from his neighbor, and knows not that at the same time he divides himself from the whole body or corporation."
This raises an important question about the nature of hatred and social aversion. In modern culture, we often celebrate cutting people off. We call it protecting our peace or setting boundaries.
Yeah, ghosting, blocking, all of that.
We think that by cutting a difficult person out of our lives in anger, we are insulating our mental fortress. But the text suggests something far more dangerous is happening. Because we are fundamentally social creatures, cutting ourselves off in anger is an act of psychological self-mutilation. To hate a neighbor is to act against the very biology of the human social body.
Now, the text doesn't leave us completely hopeless if we've already made that cut in a fit of rage. It introduces an idea of reconciliation, a regrafting. The author writes, "But herein is the gift and mercy of God, the author of this society, in that, once cut off, we may grow together and become part of the whole again."
So the system allows for healing.
Yes, reconciliation is physically and psychologically possible,
Okay.
but, and this is a critical caveat, the text immediately grounds this hopeful idea with a harsh dose of reality. The author leans on the practical, lived knowledge of actual gardeners.
Right.
The text says, "However, the branch which, once cut off afterwards, was grafted in, gardeners can tell you is not like that which sprouted together at first and still continued in the unity of the body." That line is just a gut punch. Let's think about a modern equivalent. It's like gluing a shattered favorite coffee mug back together. It might still hold coffee, but that crack is always going to be visible. Or like a massive steel beam in a skyscraper. If that beam snaps, engineers can come in and weld it back together. They use the strongest heat and the best filler metal. And technically, the beam is whole again. It can hold weight.
Right.
But any structural engineer will tell you that the beam will never flex or distribute stress the exact same way it did before it broke. The area around the weld is rigid. The molecular structure has been altered by the trauma of the break, the intense heat of the repair.
That's a great analogy.
The text is warning us about our relationships.
Yeah.
Yes, you can apologize, you can reconcile, you can weld the branch back on,
Yeah.
but you cannot unring the bell of division. The scar tissue permanently alters the dynamic.
It is a profound warning against casual division. So the imperative is clear. We must present the cutting in the first place. But how do we stay attached when the branch next to us is being fundamentally unreasonable or holding values we absolutely despise?
The author provides a very nuanced solution to this exact problem. The directive is to grow together like fellow branches in matter of good correspondence and affection, but not in matter of opinions.
That distinction, affection versus opinion, is the genius of this framework. It is entirely realistic. The author is not demanding a utopian hive mind where everyone sings campfire songs and agrees on politics, religion, or economics. People will oppose you. They will have aggressively different opinions.
The instruction is that while people might oppose you in your right courses, you cannot let them divert thee from thy good action. You hold your ground. But crucially, you must not let their opposition divert thee from thy good affection towards them.
The text frames this as a heavy dual responsibility. You must remain constant in both. In your right judgment, meaning you stick to your principles and actions, and in your true meekness towards them, meaning you maintain your fundamental human affection for them as a fellow branch.
It's a balancing act.
Exactly. If you fail in either direction, if you surrender your principles out of cowardice, or if you forsake your natural affection for your neighbor out of anger, the text uses incredibly severe language to judge you. It says failing in this way savors of the disposition of a cowardly fugitive soldier.
A cowardly fugitive soldier. You are literally abandoning your post on the social tree. It is a dereliction of your duty as a human being. Now, maintaining that post and performing that kind of patient goodness without becoming resentful or fake requires a massive level of authenticity. The text explores this next, which brings us to the most mysterious visual element in the notes we received. Right in the middle of the document, acting as a bridge between these sections, is a giant, bold, red letter T.
Yeah, it's a striking visual interruption in an otherwise dense manuscript. Based on the context of the paragraphs immediately following it, it clearly acts as a thematic signpost. It marks a transition into the concepts of tragedies and theorems. It is the exact point where the text zooms out from the internal mechanics of the single soul and looks out onto the great theater of human life.
Let's follow that signpost. The text dives into a literal history of the theater to explain how we should process external events. It argues that ancient tragedies were originally instituted to put men in mind of worldly chances and casualties, that these things in the ordinary course of nature did so happen.
The author is analyzing the psychological function of art. Why do humans willingly sit in an amphitheater to watch horrific things happen on stage? The text references the story of Oedipus, specifically noting his cry to Mount Cithaeron, the desolate place where he was left to die as an infant and where he wishes he had died after discovering the horrifying truth of his life. Why do we watch Oedipus suffer?
The text argues that we watch the tragedy on the small stage so that when we are pleased and delighted by such accidents upon this stage, we would not by the same things in a greater stage be grieved and afflicted.
The theater is a psychological simulator. It's a safe, contained environment to experience the terrifying variability of fortune. You watch the hero lose his kingdom, his family, and his sight, and you internalize the fact that disaster is woven into the fabric of nature. So when disaster inevitably strikes the greater stage of your actual life, you are not completely shattered by the shock of it.
It's like an emotional vaccine. You take a deadened version of the virus, the play, to build immunity for the real world.
Exactly.
The text then traces the evolution of comedy. It notes that the ancient comedy, or old comedy, had the liberty to inveigh against personal vices. It used absolute freedom of speech to restrain men from pride and arrogancy. It specifically names Diogenes the Cynic as someone who utilized this method, speaking blunt truth to power, mocking the pompous elites to drag them back down to reality.
Old comedy had philosophical teeth. It was a mirror held up to societal vanity. But the text then offers a sharp critique of what came next, the middle and new comedy. The author argues, and the translator's footnotes clarify this, that this newer comedy degenerated into a mere show of skill in mimicry.
It lost its purpose. It became just about delight and distraction, empty entertainment. It became performative and fake. And this critique of fakeness versus authenticity leads right into one of my absolute favorite parts of this entire deep dive. Here's where it gets really interesting. The author goes on a brutal, centuries-old tirade against the performative aspect of goodness.
It is wonderfully direct and completely timeless.
The text says, "How rotten and insincere is he that saith, I am resolved to carry myself hereafter towards you with all ingenuity and simplicity."
The author is essentially screaming, "Do not tell me you are going to be honest with me. The act of declaring your honesty makes me immediately suspect you are lying."
Exactly. The author writes, "O man, what doest thou mean? What needs this profession of thine? The thing itself will show it." It reminds me so much of a specific modern phenomenon, the influencer apology video. Or those long, teary-eyed social media posts where someone writes 1,000 words about how authentic and vulnerable they were being right now.
Oh yeah, the humble bragging.
Right. The author is looking at that behavior and saying, stop announcing your simplicity. It should be written on your forehead. But the analogy the text uses for true simplicity is so bizarre, yet so structurally perfect. It says true goodness should function exactly like terrible body odor.
Yes, like he whose armholes are offensive.
It's hilarious that whosoever stands by as soon as ever he comes near him may, as it were, smell him, whether he will or no. You shouldn't have to announce your good character. You should hit people in the face the moment you walk into the room, just like severe BO. If you have to tell people you're being simple, honest, and good, you're almost certainly acting.
The synthesis here is sharp. The affectation of simplicity is nowise laudable. Acting like you don't care about appearances is just another way of caring deeply about appearances. True goodness, the text insists, cannot be hidden. It shows in the eyes, in the micro-expressions, in the cadence of the voice, instantly.
So, if we synthesize where we are, we need an authentic, unshakable goodness. We need to stay grafted to the social tree, maintaining affection even when we disagree. We need to not be surprised by the tragedies on the greater stage of life. The theory is rock solid. But let's get down to brass tacks.
Right, the practical application.
How do we actually execute this when we are face-to-face with someone who is actively, maliciously doing us wrong? This brings us to a section of the text that is essentially an ancient masterclass in conflict resolution. The author lays out 10 specific, actionable rules for dealing with difficult people.
The text beautifully frames these as gifts. 9 gifts from the muses, the goddesses of inspiration and the arts, and a 10th, final, supreme gift from Hercules. If we truly want to understand how to maintain that luminous, perfect sphere of a soul under intense interpersonal pressure, we have to deeply analyze the mechanics of these rules.
Let's systematically break them down because they build on each other. Rules 1 and 2 set the foundation of perspective. The first rule is remembering our reference to others. We are born for one another's good. The text uses the analogy of a ram in a flock of sheep or a bull in a herd. We have an undeniable duty to the collective. We aren't lone wolves. And the second rule is to consider what these difficult people are like at board and upon their beds.
Rule 2 is a profound empathy hack. When someone is screaming at you over a mistake at work or sending a vicious passive-aggressive email, they seem like a monolithic monster of pure malice. But the second rule asks you to visualize them eating their mundane dinner or sleeping in their bed.
It humanizes them.
Exactly. It strips away the armor of their hostility and reveals their ordinary, vulnerable, often tired human state. It also asks you to consider how they are forced by their opinions that they hold to do what they do. They are trapped by their own flawed internal programming, acting out of a pride and self-conceit that they cannot even see.
Which flows perfectly into the mechanics of Rules 3 and 4, which are about recognizing ignorance and confronting our own hypocrisy. Rule 3 brings in Plato's famous opinion that no soul doth willingly err. The text argues that if people do things not rightly, they do it against their wills and through mere ignorance. People generally don't wake up, look in the mirror, and say, I am going to be the villain today. They're desperately pursuing what they mistakenly think is good, necessary, or protective for themselves.
Right.
And Rule 4 forces us to look in that same mirror. It bluntly states, Thou thyself doest transgress in many things, and art even such another as they are.
Rule 4 is the ultimate deflator of self-righteousness. The author points out a devastating truth. Even if you aren't currently committing the specific sin the other person is committing, you still possess in thyself an habitual disposition to them. You have the latent capacity for the exact same malice, greed, or foolishness.
Wow.
And the text notes that the only reason you might not be acting on it right now is through fear of getting caught or vainglory or some ambitious, foolish respect for your reputation. You aren't intrinsically, biologically better than them. You just have different constraints operating on you at this exact moment.
We are all carrying the same flawed software. Now, Rule 5 is one I want to spend some time on because it is incredibly relevant today. It reminds us that we rarely, if ever, know the whole story. The text says, for many things are done by way of discrete policy. You need a massive amount of context before you can judiciously judge another person's action. Let's look at a modern scenario. Social media pylons. We see a 10-second video clip of someone losing their temper in public, and millions of people instantly decide this person is fundamentally evil and deserves to have their life ruined. But Rule 5 demands we pause. We don't know the discrete policy. We don't know if that person just received a terminal diagnosis or if they haven't slept in 3 days because they're caring for a sick child.
Exactly. The text explicitly warns against absolute judgment without absolute context, which we almost never possess. And then Rules 7 and 8 deal with the internal mechanics of how we react when we are wronged. This loops perfectly back to our earlier discussion about wiping the printed ink off objects.
Right.
Rule 7 says it is not the sins themselves that actually trouble us. Those sins exist entirely in the minds and actions of the people committing them. What actually troubles our mind is our own opinions concerning those sins. The author instructs us to part with the internal conceit that the thing is grievous to us, and instantly the anger is removed.
And Rule 8 warns us about the devastating collateral damage of our own reaction. It states a hard truth. The things that follow our fix of anger and grief are far more grievous in themselves than those very things which we are so grieved or angry for.
Yeah, the compound interest of anger.
Let's say your partner accidentally breaks a dish you loved. The loss of the dish is a minor material subtraction, but your resulting screaming match, the words you say that you can't take back, the lingering resentment that poisons the house for 3 days, that reaction does infinitely more damage to the fabric of your life than the shattered ceramic ever could.
Which culminates in Rule 9, the absolute pinnacle of the Muse's gifts. It is the tactical application of everything we've discussed so far. The rule is that meekness is a thing unconquerable if it be true and natural and not affected or hypocritical.
Meekness as an unconquerable superpower. We usually associate meekness with weakness, but the text frames it as an impenetrable shield. It asks how the most fierce, malicious person can possibly hold out against you if you continually maintain a calm, loving disposition toward them. And it gives us an actual script.
Yes, the my son script.
It says when someone is actively trying to do you wrong, you should remain in good temper and tenderly instruct them. My son, we were not born for this, to hurt and annoy one another. It will be thy hurt, not mine, my son. You're supposed to demonstrate to them that bees don't sting each other unprovoked, and neither do other naturally sociable creatures.
But the author is very careful to note that the delivery of this script is critical. The text warns against doing this scoffingly or by way of reproach, or worst of all, to show off your superior patience to bystanders. It must be done tenderly, without harsh words, as if no one else is watching. It is an act of pure, unegoic correction.
Now, regarding how radically different groups of people react to these deep philosophical shifts, especially concerning maintaining calm in the face of ultimate threats, I need to bring up a specific historical reference the author makes earlier in the text. When talking about facing mortality and maintaining a reasoned mind, the author mentions that the soul's readiness to separate from the body should proceed not from an obstinate and peremptory resolution of the mind, violently and passionately set upon opposition, as Christians are wont, but from a peculiar judgment, with discretion and gravity. I want to quickly pause here for you listening. As we explore this deep dive, we are dissecting an ancient text written by a prominent historical figure in a very specific, politically charged era of the Roman Empire. This passing reference reflects the ancient author's personal observations and the intense societal friction of that time regarding early Christians and their highly visible approach to martyrdom. To be absolutely clear, we are remaining entirely neutral here. We aren't endorsing, validating, or condemning this religious commentary. We're merely examining it to understand the author's broader philosophical argument, which is advocating for a deeply reasoned, discreet approach to death rather than one that is obstinate or theatrical.
That context is vital. The author's broader thesis, regardless of who he is critiquing, is always aiming at that calm, spherical equilibrium we discussed earlier. The ultimate goal is to avoid being violently and passionately set on anything, even the dramatic end of your own life. Every action, even facing death, should stem from peculiar judgment and gravity, so that others might be persuaded by the quiet dignity of your example, rather than by noise or passionate exclamations.
That quiet gravity is the hallmark of the mental fortress. But getting back to our list of rules for dealing with daily conflict, I want to zero in on the 10th and final rule. The text elevates this one above the rest, explicitly calling it the 10th gift from Hercules, the guide and leader of the Muses.
Hercules is universally recognized as the symbol of immense strength and grueling labor. By attributing this final rule to him, the author is signaling that this principle is perhaps the hardest one to actually implement, but it yields the most powerful results.
Rule 10 states bluntly that it is a madman's part to look that there should be no wicked men in the world because it is impossible. And it goes a step further, saying that it is tyrannical to brook well enough that there are wicked men out there in the world, but to demand that none of them should ever transgress against you specifically.
It is a piercing, uncomfortable psychological insight. We all have a tyrant inside us that demands reality bend to our preferences.
Let's frame this with a modern scenario.
Yeah.
Imagine someone playing a highly competitive multiplayer online video game. The entire premise of the game is that other players are trying to defeat you, steal your resources, and win. That is the objective reality of the digital environment. Now imagine a player who boots up the game but then throws a violent temper tantrum every single time an opponent attacks them. That is the part of a madman.
Right, because you logged into a competitive arena.
Getting angry doesn't change the code of the game, it just ruins your experience. The text calls this tyrannical, because the tyrant demands that the fundamental rules of reality somehow grant them a personal VIP exemption. The wise person accepts the existence of bad actors, aggressive competitors, and difficult people as a natural feature of the landscape.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the text, we see the profound internal shift the author is trying to achieve. The ultimate realization is that our standard definition of strength is entirely backward. We think anger is strength, but the text states plainly, "For the nearer everything is unto unpassionateness, the nearer it is unto power. And as grief doth proceed from weakness, so doth anger. For both he that is angry and that grieveth, have received a wound, and cowardly have, as it were, yielded themselves unto their affections."
Anger is a wound. We strut around thinking of our anger as a weapon we wield against others to show them who is boss, but the text exposes it as a sign that our defenses have been breached. We haven't conquered the situation, we have yielded to it.
Yes. The moment you get genuinely angry, you have allowed the external world to reach its hand inside your fortress and dictate your internal state. True power, true Herculean strength, lies in being unpassionate. Now, that does not mean being an emotionless robot. Unpassionate in this context means you are not the passive, helpless victim of your passions or external events. You maintain your spherical integrity regardless of what the wicked men in the world are doing.
So we have the blueprint for the fortress, we've analyzed the mechanics of the social tree, we've armed ourselves with the 10 rules of conflict, but the threats aren't just external bad actors. The text outlines 4 specific, insidious internal rebellions that we have to constantly guard against.
The author identifies 4 several dispositions or inclinations, which, to be aware of, thou must carefully observe, and whensoever thou doest discover them, thou must rectify them.
The first rebellion is unnecessary imagination. This is our mind's incredible ability to spin out elaborate, terrifying anxieties about things that haven't even happened yet, fighting phantom battles in the future. The second is being uncharitable, which severs us from the social tree we just discussed. The third one is fascinating, and I want to dive deep into it. Speaking as another man's slave or instrument, meaning saying things you don't truly believe. And the fourth rebellion is letting the more divine, rational part of you become subject to the ignoble part of thy body and the gross lusts and concupiscences thereof.
Let's look at the mechanics of the third rebellion, speaking as a slave. How does this corrupt the mind's sphere? When you parrot an opinion just to fit in with a crowd, or when you say what you think your boss wants to hear rather than the truth, you are literally fracturing your own integrity. You are splitting your mind into what you believe versus what you project. This weakens the sphere.
Think about the modern algorithmic echo chamber. People constantly curate their opinions online to ensure they get retweets, likes, and validation from their specific tribe. They become instruments of the algorithm. They are speaking as slaves to the feed. The text calls that behavior senseless and absurd because you are surrendering the autonomy of your most valuable possession, your rational mind, for cheap external points.
And the text explains why all 4 of these internal rebellions are so tragically unnatural. The author draws a beautiful comparison to the physical elements of the cosmos. It notes that elements like earth and water naturally tend downwards, while air and fire naturally tend upwards due to their composition. However, if the ordinance of the universe places fire down below in a mixed body, it abides patiently wheresoever, though against their nature, they are placed. The physical elements, no matter how powerful, obey the grand placement of the universe.
Even fire falls in line with the cosmic order.
Exactly. And so the text asks a devastating rhetorical question. Is it not a grievous thing, then, that thy reasonable part only should be disobedient and should not endure to keep its place? When your mind rebels, whether through injustice, people-pleasing, paralyzing sorrow, or giving in to base lusts, it is fundamentally a separation from nature. You, the conscious human, are the only part of the entire cosmos arrogantly refusing to play your part.
It is a staggering level of cosmic stubbornness. And speaking of the cosmos and the natural order of things, we have to talk about the most intense, final natural transition of all, mortality. We touched on it earlier with the dancer analogy, but the text gets incredibly raw and intimate about facing death toward the end of the notes. It references Epictetus and offers a metaphor about harvesting that is really tough to swallow.
Yes. The text quotes Epictetus advising us on how to maintain perspective with our loved ones. As often as a father kisseth his child, he should say secretly with himself, tomorrow perchance shall he die.
Okay, I have to push back hard on this one too. That sounds absolutely horrific. Imagine tucking your young child into bed, kissing their forehead, feeling all that profound love, and then intentionally whispering to yourself, well, they might be a corpse tomorrow. That doesn't seem like a path to equanimity. It seems like a recipe for a psychotic break or constant paralyzing anxiety. How is dwelling on the imminent death of a child supposed to make you a stronger, better person?
It sounds deeply shocking to our modern sensibilities, which are trained to deny death at all costs. But look at how the text immediately defends the practice. The author anticipates exactly your reaction. Epictetus argues back, no words ominous that signify anything that is natural. He says, reminding yourself of mortality is in very truth indeed not more ominous than saying, I am going to cut down grapes when they are ripe.
Cutting down grapes when they are ripe.
The author unpacks the physics of this beautifully. The text points out that there are so many natural mutations of a single thing in the world. You have green grapes, which mutate into ripe grapes, which mutate into dried grapes, which mutate into raisins. None of these changes are a mutation into absolute nothingness. The text explicitly says, death is a mutation, not into that which hath no being at all, but into that which is not yet in being.
That which is not yet in being. It completely reframes the mechanics of death. It isn't a magical vanishing act where someone gets deleted from the universe. It is a transformation of state, following the exact same rules as the grape turning into a raisin. The physical elements that make up the child or make up you are just shifting form to become something else. Reminding yourself of that while kissing your child isn't about being a morbid pessimist. It is an exercise in absolute piercing presence. It forces you to violently appreciate the ripe grape phase right now, in this exact second, because the mutation into the next phase is entirely inevitable and completely natural.
It burns away all the triviality that usually ruins our relationships. When you view your loved ones through that lens, you don't bicker about whose turn it is to take out the trash. And it ties back perfectly to the ultimate triumphant thesis of the entire source document. Of the free will, there is no thief or robber. You are entirely in control of how you interpret the world. You already have perfect reason available to you right now.
The text ends with this brilliant, slightly sarcastic quote from Socrates. He walks up to people and asks them, "What will you have? The souls of reasonable or unreasonable creatures?" Obviously, people answer, reasonable. He then asks if they want souls whose reason is perfect or corrupted. They say perfect, and Socrates delivers the ultimate punchline. "Why then labor ye not for such? Because we have them already. What then do ye so strive and contend between you?"
We already possess the very thing we are frantically searching for in self-help books, status symbols, and other people's approval. The perfect, reasonable soul is already installed in your hardware. We just have to stop rebelling against nature, stop letting the tyrant inside us demand the impossible, wipe the printed opinions off our minds, and let the sphere shine.
So what does this all mean? How do we wrap this massive, ancient, architectural blueprint for the mind into something you can carry with you out the door today?
If we synthesize the core mechanics for the listener, your mind is designed by nature to be an unconquerable sphere, completely self-contained, generating its own light regardless of external circumstances. Human society is an interconnected tree, and regardless of how twisted or difficult the other branches become, your highest duty is to stay affectionately grafted to the whole. And finally, true strength, Herculean power, is never found in yielding to anger or grief. It is found in maintaining a calm, almost tender meekness in the face of the world's inevitable hostility.
The next time you feel overwhelmed by a flood of chaotic information, or you find yourself furious at a malicious coworker, or you were kept awake at night panicking about the future, remember that the bugbears of the world are just shadows. You are the printing press. You have the power to wipe the opinions from your mind. You don't have to be conquered by the snare drum of your desires, and you don't have to yield your mental fortress to the wicked men of the world. You can just let the sphere shine.
To leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over, let's look at a beautiful, quiet detail tucked away in the text. The author mentions the daily practice of the ancient Pythagoreans. It notes that, betimes in the morning the first thing they did, to look up unto the heavens, to put themselves in mind of them who constantly and invariably did perform their task, as also to put themselves in mind of orderliness, or good order, and of purity, and of naked simplicity. They looked at the stars every single morning because, as the text notes, no star or planet hath any cover before it.
Naked simplicity.
Yeah.
Stripped of all the performative, exhausting layers we put on down here on Earth.
So the question for you to explore on your own tomorrow morning is this. If you had to pick one thing in your modern, chaotic daily life to look at every single day, something that instantly strips away your ego, reminds you of your tiny but vital place in the vast order of things, and grounds you in the naked simplicity of the universe, what would your stars be?
What an incredible question. Find your stars, build your invisible fortress, and remember that the strongest panic room has no physical walls at all, just a clear, unconquerable mind. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.